Good evening. This is the February 9th, 2023 meeting of the Portsmouth Energy Advisory Committee, and we're here tonight to have a public hearing on the energy aggregation plan which we've created. Just a little bit of explanation and a little bit of context. I think we all feel like we pay too much for electricity and it's too dirty in terms of fossil fuels. And this committee was formed to work on how we could use RSA 53E to benefit the residents and businesses of the city. And RSA 53E allows cities and towns to aggregate the demand of their customers, electric customers, and go to the energy markets and purchase electric supply. The delivery is still done by your utility, but the supply portion of your bill is what this community power article can accomplish. And in our first 6 months, we did an extensive study of should we just go to a utility broker, an electricity broker, and use our combined aggregated demand to get good rates, or should we join the Community Power Coalition of New Hampshire, which is in itself going to be basically a co-op run by cities and towns, for cities and towns, on a nonprofit basis, to aggregate lots of towns' energy supply and take advantage of community power. And we decided to go that route. The coalition now has 27 members and more than 125,000 residents will be represented by it. And we felt that this would give the best long-term value for customers of the city. It's more flexible. Customers don't have as many onerous contracts, which anybody who's tried to buy their own electricity knows can be very tricky and very constrictive. And it offers some advantages for the long term to be able to build up reserves from the sale of electricity to reinvest in solar projects, wind projects, hydro projects around the state, and that was exciting to us. So tonight we're going to start off with an explanation of community power and a presentation, and then we sent a survey out on cards to everybody in the city, and we've had hundreds and hundreds of responses, more than 400 responses to that. So we'll share what people would like to see in the community power program that we would create. And then we're going to start the public hearing, and everyone will have a chance to speak to, for, or against. And we'll use that input in our energy aggregation plan. So first up, we have Henry Herndon, who is from the Community Power Coalition of New Hampshire, and he's going to go over with you how the community power works, what the benefits are, and how it would appear on your utility bill. So, Henry, thank you for joining us again.
Of course.
Try the mic close, please.
How's this? So my name is Henry Herndon. I'm a consultant here on behalf of Community Power Coalition of New Hampshire, and I'll be going through an overview of community power and the Portsmouth Community Power Electric Aggregation Plan. Before I dive into any of that, just want to note we're in the midst of a really exciting period for Portsmouth and an additional 27 cities, towns, and counties across the state who have been working together to get this market off the ground for past several years, really, and that's all coming to fruition in the coming weeks and months. So the first 8, 9, 10 communities are going to go live with their programs this coming spring. And Portsmouth is a very fast follower in that group and in position to, if it would choose to do so, launch a program to immediately start delivering rate relief and rate savings for customers as soon as potentially June of this year. With that, we'll sort of get into the nuts and bolts of what community power is, how it works, how the process has gone, and what Portsmouth's plan is for implementation. And just really like broad brush strokes, I think I'll just reiterate a little bit of what Councillor Tabor has described, but these programs are about leveraging an economy of scale to result in more affordable electricity for residents and businesses throughout the city, and also create more choices for renewable energy and sourcing power locally or from cleaner sources within the city or within the state. So, overview of the agenda, we'll do what is community power, we'll talk about the plan, we'll talk about the statewide coalition, this new nonprofit power agency that Portsmouth is a member of and a strong leader in, that is working on a statewide basis to help these programs get off the ground, and really positioned to transform the New Hampshire electricity market in a lot of positive ways. We'll talk about the timeline, and we'll do Q&A and move into the public hearing. So I've described some of this, but I will just call attention to the relevant RSA. That's RSA 53E, relative to the aggregation of electric customers by municipalities and counties. This is a law that has been on the books since 1996, but really wasn't effective until it was amended and adjusted in both 2019 and in 2021. And this is a bipartisan policy supported by Democrats, Republicans. Both of the positive bills that sort of improved the statute and made it usable. The first was passed by a Democrat-controlled House and Senate and signed by Governor Sununu, and then the second was passed by a Republican House and Senate and signed by Governor Sununu. So these programs, they're market-based, they're about local control, they're about really giving cities and towns the ability to chart these programs for themselves. And in that RSA, there's just a couple pieces I'll call attention to. One is really this focus on encouraging voluntary, cost-effective, and innovative solutions to local needs with careful consideration of local conditions and opportunities. So it's really about giving the municipality and the community the tools to really take control of its own energy decisions. And for this slide, we can just sort of open up all the pieces. Yes. So I'll use a term, really what community power does is it enables the city of Portsmouth to become the default electricity supplier or provider. There's three pieces to this. There's the economy of scale, which we've discussed, where if you pool together the buying power of the residents and businesses across the city, you get that economy of scale, and that can result in lower costs. Importantly, the utility company will continue to own and operate the grid, deliver that electricity, be responsible for reliability and outages, and really is a key partner to Portsmouth Community Power. And then a third piece here is the benefits that this can afford customers. So lower rates, both through the economy of scale, but also through a less regulated and more market-based approach to procurement, which I'll talk about a little later. And then other options. So there's a default rate that will be cheaper for all electric customers, but any individual customer will have greater access to choice. They could choose a 50% or 100% renewable energy product. And then over time, we see more mature markets develop further offerings. These could be things like leveraging the use of energy storage to shift load away from peak time usage and lower costs that way. Allow cities and towns to contract directly with developers to build new generators, new solar storage locally in the state to then provide power to Portsmouth's portfolio, the Portsmouth Community Power portfolio, and other sort of longer-term potential benefits. And I've talked through some of these already, so I'll be brief here, but obviously the local control, we've seen other states have lower costs. Some communities are motivated by renewable energy, and I understand there are some policies and resolutions in the city of Portsmouth to that effect, and some of those innovative developments that can be enabled through community power. Importantly, Portsmouth's plan states that the program will only launch if it is able to initially offer residential default rates that are lower than or competitive with those offered by Eversource. So there's a built-in protection where this program won't go live unless the rate is attractive and going to save customers money from day one. So what does this look like for an individual customer? On your electric bill, there's really two components. There's the energy supply. This is a competitive market where customers today have choice. They can shop for their energy supply on the open market. And then the other half is the delivery. That's the poles and wires. That's Eversource. That's your monopoly grid operator. You don't really have choice there. We're only talking about the energy supply portion of the bill here. That's the only piece that will change. And if we go to the next slide, this is the second page of an Eversource bill, and really, again, just highlighting that from the customer perspective, what will change is instead of Eversource being the default electricity supplier, now Portsmouth Community Power will be able to choose where that power comes from, shop for that power, and be listed on the bill in some fashion to make that clear to customers. So I'm going to reiterate a little bit here, but Eversource still owns the grid and is compensated for that. There's no real financial impact to the utility because they have divested of their generation. They no longer own any power plants, so that's not a component of their revenue stream. So the utility is financially indifferent, and they continue to own and operate the grid. If this plan is adopted, when this plan is adopted by the City Council, it doesn't require any action, but it gives the City Council the authority to contract for services. And those could be with a private broker, that could be through the nonprofit Community Power Coalition, of which Portsmouth is a key leader in creating. And then that provider could procure power and operate the program on behalf of the city. Another important point is that any individual customer, from the customer perspective, this is a completely voluntary program. No one has to participate. Anyone could choose to leave at any time with no penalty. And we'll get into sort of the enrollment process on another slide.
And if I can just add, Henry, that flexibility to opt out at any time was a significant difference between CPCNH and the broker programs when we did the research.
So the plan, this RSA that I referred to, requires that every municipality form a committee and task that committee with developing a plan and incorporating public input into that plan. We're at the second of two public hearings that are required by law. And this is the committee, the Portsmouth Energy Advisory Committee, that has been responsible and working very hard over the past year, perhaps 2 years, to understand community power, connect with other communities from across the state, research best practices, and develop this plan to where we are at present. The plan lays out the goals and objectives, lower rates, more choice, expanded options for customers, customer protections, and it summarizes the process for moving forward and establishes governance authority. So, ensuring that the City Council is responsible for the overall oversight of the program, but, professional experts would be enlisted and vetted to actually manage procurement on your behalf. There's some legal requirements. There's certain environmental standards that you have to meet, some certain state laws, and you have to address how certain groups of customers are or are not addressed. So just for example, the plan addresses net metering customers and provides for how they could participate or not participate in the program. And the plan ensures that electric assistance program participants, these are income qualified folks who receive a discount on their electricity rate. It ensures that they will continue to receive those discounts. What the plan doesn't do is it doesn't commit the city to any action, and it does not impose any financial commitment or liability. So under the law, these programs cannot be funded by taxpayer funds in any sense. The funding for the programs comes from the sale of electricity, and through that electricity supply rate pays for any operational cost of the program. So fully shielded and separate from taxpayer fund. And this slide just lays out the chapters. I certainly encourage any members of the public to read the plan. It's very educational, informative, and part of what Community Power really strives to achieve is to demystify the power sector. There's a lot of complexity behind the scenes, and what we're seeing across the state is cities and towns sort of lifting up the hood on how does this all work and educate themselves so they can make informed decisions and can be making better choices on behalf of their communities. This is a bit of a summary slide. So I mentioned this term default electricity supplier. So what that means is right now, Eversource, the investor-owned utility, is the default supplier. Anyone can choose another option, but the fallback is Eversource. Portsmouth Community Power would replace Eversource as that default on an opt-out basis, so a customer could choose to opt out of the program. The program will also allow customers to opt up to various things, such as more renewable energy for their energy supply, or over time, things like time of use rates, where if you're using your electricity in the off-peak hours, it's less expensive, and you can see that in the rates you pay, and be incentivized not to consume energy at high-cost peak period times. Gets a little wonky. And I mentioned the self-funded nature of these programs, again, no taxpayer funds, and I mentioned that when the plan is adopted, it authorizes the city council to contract for services, and then this committee would provide advisory support to that process. So enrollment, this is an important slide for folks to understand. If and when the city council decides to launch Portsmouth Community Power, they go into the market, they see that the price is right, they see they can save customers money, they initiate the program. What will occur is 30 days before launch, all customers and all electric accounts in the city of Portsmouth will receive a mailed notification. It'll say, welcome to Portsmouth Community Power. Here's your new electricity supply rate. Here's that compared to the Eversource rate. If you would choose to opt out, go to this website, click the button, you'll stay with Eversource, or you could choose another provider. And those would all be sent 30 days before the enrollment. For those customers that already shop, there are some customers that buy power from competitive electric suppliers on the market. They would receive that notification, but they would not be affected in any way unless they chose to go to the website and click the enroll button and join Portsmouth Community Power. And those customers would want to understand, do they have an exit fee from whatever broker, supplier, contract they might be in, and those kinds of details. And similarly, if new customers are coming online, they would receive similar notices and be enrolled into this program, as it is the new default electricity supply. And just to reiterate, they're voluntary. Customers can exit the program just by going to the website, opting out, and at the next sort of meter read date, the next monthly billing period, they would be disenrolled from that program.
And Henry, just one other scenario is if a customer were to opt out at enrollment, they can subsequently opt back into the program at a future point as well.
That's correct.
So it's not a one-time decision.
Right.
You can opt out, but opt back in the future.
So there's just one more option for the customers, and they have sort of full switching flexibility. They can go in and off, on and off the program as they would choose.
Do you want to hold questions to the end?
Yeah.
You might just say that for did Zoom.
Are we okay with holding questions to the end? Okay.
And from Zoom.
I just want to make a clarification there that you can switch back and forth, but it's on a monthly basis.
It's a good point. So it's on a monthly basis on your billing cycle basis. or your meter read basis.
Can I just underscore one thing that you said, Henry? And this is about, when we're talking about divestiture of the utilities of their own generation, people should be clear about this because during the energy crisis boom, a lot of people had the impression that our utilities were gouging us because they were charging too much for electricity. And in fact, our electric utilities in the state right now, at least in New Hampshire, are not making profit on delivering electricity to us. They're making profit on the delivery charges, but not on the supply.
Correct.
The supply is something they get, like every other utility, from the New England marketplace at whatever lowest price they can get.
Right.
And they're not making money on that.
Right.
Okay.
That's correct. That's accurate. And, we all saw our electricity rates double or more over the past several months. And, that's not Eversource's fault. That's just the market responding to, international fossil fuel prices and largely driven by, international crisis, war in Ukraine. So Eversource is not sort of arbitrarily raising those electricity rates for the supply. This slide is depicting the choices that customers would have available to them. So the city of Portsmouth could decide if they were to go with the coalition, sort of one of two default options. There is Granite Basic, which has the minimum renewable energy content allowed under state law. That's 23% this year. And the city of Portsmouth could say we want that to be the default that all customers receive. There's also Granite Plus, that is a 10% more renewable energy, so a greener product option, and the city council could choose to have that be the default. And we'll have rates set on those, the coalition will have rates set on those likely within a month. So those will all be posted and publicly available for review. Then there's two optional products. There's the Clean 50 and Clean 100, 50% renewable, 100% renewable. So any customer could choose to invest in greener power if they would choose to do so. And then over time, this menu can grow. So what some communities are particularly excited about is the possibility of sourcing some of their power from new clean generators in the state, developing projects locally. There are benefits there are cost benefits to that, particularly if those resources can produce power at high cost times and avoid some of the wholesale costs, avoid things like interstate transmission costs and capacity costs. So there are opportunities to develop local energy projects over time that are cost reducers and to blend that into the Portsmouth community power mix. This is sort of a longer term aspiration, but something that is a motivator for a number of communities.
And Henry, just one thing is the Granite Basic with the minimum renewable portfolio standard. That's the one that would compare to Eversource. So the Eversource and the other utilities in the state, their default rate is always the minimum RPS standard, right?
That's right.
Okay.
And on a cost basis, the Granite Basic at launch will be cheaper than Eversource.
Right.
And then this is to be determined, but it's quite possible that that second product, Granite Plus, would have more renewable content and be cheaper than the Eversource rate. It'll be more expensive than the Granite Basic, but that's sort of a policy decision for different communities. So the coalition. This is the nonprofit power agency created or incorporated on October 1st of 2021, so a bit more than a year ago. And it was first incorporated with 14 cities and towns, and since then it's doubled in size. There are 28 cities, towns, and counties that are members of this nonprofit organization, and it's governed by its members. So it was created by cities and towns. Each city and town has appointed a representative to its board of directors. Kevin Charette and not Councilor Tabor, Peter Rice sit on the board of directors representing the city of Portsmouth. Kevin is actually the vice chair of the board. And so it's fully governed and all of the oversight is done by the member communities. They make all the decisions about its budget, its solicitations, its hiring of expert vendors, all of the vetting. And importantly, they also oversee the reserve fund and the cash flow. So this collection of communities, there's an obvious economy of scale. At full enrollment, these communities would represent 125,000 electric customers. That's a significant volume of electricity sales. And the revenue from the sale of that electricity across all these communities through the coalition, those revenues are controlled by the member cities and towns. So rather than the sort of quote-unquote profit flowing to a private supplier on the other end of the deal, now the communities of New Hampshire have created their own supplier, and they can accrue those revenues, that net profit, into reserves that has multiple benefits. First and foremost, that's keeping rates low over time, sort of a rainy day fund for your electricity rates if the market changes. But over time, there's also the ability to reinvest into the communities, reinvest into local economic development, project development, energy projects that are directly benefiting the communities.
And Henry, you're having conversations with many more communities.
And we're having conversations with many more communities. So there's sort of there's this 28, and then there are the several dozen additional cities and towns that have expressed interest. They're beginning to form committees. They're looking at this. So there's significant growth potential for the coalition's membership. And really the group could quickly become the largest electricity supplier in the state, larger than the utilities. Well, at right present, it's larger than Unitil and Liberty at full enrollment, but could surpass Eversource in a few years. Again, only for energy supply, not for owning poles and wires. So yeah, we're in the launch period right now. So there are 9 cities and towns that have authorized launch this spring, including Exeter and Rye, your neighbors, and then a few in the Upper Valley, a few in the Southwest. I believe the city of Nashua is scheduled to vote on launch authorizations this coming Tuesday. So that group is targeting April as enrolling customers and bringing them onto that new lower supply rate and starting to accrue the reserves from the sale of electricity. This slide is probably hard to read, but this is just illustrating the governance for communities by communities, listing the 27 directors and alternates. These are the local officials, staff, industry veterans that have been appointed to serve on the board of directors in a volunteer capacity. And there's a real breadth and depth of expertise. Kevin worked for Eversource for his career and has brought a real depth of expertise to the board from that perspective. And there are many other highly qualified and experienced individuals that are contributing from across the state to make this happen. And so governance on the one side, operations on the other side. These are the technical experts that have been hired through a competitive solicitation process to procure power, to enroll customers, to manage all the customer service, and all of the back-end operational pieces that are required. So I'll just talk about a few of them. Ascend Analytics is going to manage procurement and really do the portfolio risk management on behalf of the coalition. They're the entity that will monitor the market day to day, week to week, month to month, and then manage the portfolio of energy supply that the coalition contracts for. Calpine Energy Solutions, and really both of these two firms have real deep experience running these agencies in other states. And they were selected from a really solid pool of a number of really qualified respondents to the solicitation process. But Calpine, they'll do all of the customer data management, customer service, customer enrollments, and also serve as the load serving entity. They'll sit in the wholesale market on behalf of the coalition. There's a local nonprofit, Clean Energy New Hampshire, that's providing community engagement support. A couple of law firms, a couple of startup consultants, including myself, and River City Bank is providing financial and banking services and will maintain the account through which revenue flows on behalf of the coalition.
Just on that, Henry, River City Bank may be a foreign entity for most of us, but they're based in California, where there's 25 community power aggregation programs similar to New Hampshire, and they've been the bank, the financial institution that has supported upwards of 25 CPAs in California, so they're very experienced in this space.
I'll also just note there's a CEO search committee and a firm that is running through a process of identifying candidates, vetting them, and bringing them in for interviews to onboard as the CEO of the coalition. Kevin's also involved in that, along with a number of other things. So that's very exciting. This is sort of a conceptual slide, just to illustrate some of what I've already discussed a little bit. But on the left pie chart, you can see the breakdown, illustrative, of the Eversource delivery charges in gray, and then the supply charge in blue. That's what Portsmouth Community Power would purchase for energy supply. On the right-hand side, looking at this bar chart, this is an illustration of how that revenue is allocated, how that, in this example, that 10 cents per kilowatt hour for energy supply would be spent. Obviously, in the market right now, we're looking at 22 cents a kilowatt hour, so this is just an educational slide here. It's not meant to be exactly what the market prices are. The point is, if you look at this slide in the bar chart, the blue portion here represents what you pay for energy supply. Whether you're paying Eversource, whether you're paying a competitive supplier, whether you're paying for community power, the vast majority of that supply rate flows to the cost of generating electricity. There's a gray portion above the blue that represents the overhead or the financing costs of whoever's selling you that power. Again, whether it's a competitive supplier, Eversource's supplier, community power program, there is an overhead cost. And then this green bar represents that reserve fund. So if you were purchasing from a private entity, that would be their 8, 12, 15% markup, their profit margin on top. Through the coalition, this green bar is representing the reserves that are captured by the communities and held on their behalf in reserve funds, so that if the market rises in the future, you can lean on those reserves, keep rates low, or leverage to finance some of those local projects for sort of longer term benefits. And I guess I'll leave it at that for this slide. This is illustrating the different pieces, the different actors. In green, we have Portsmouth Community Power. This committee has developed a plan. They will, after this hearing, they will send that plan to the Public Utility Commission, a state regulator, for review and approval. And the state has 60 days to review that plan. And the city council does a number of things. They've appointed the directors to the CPC&H board, and they will consider adoption of this plan and have general oversight authority. Down at the bottom, this blue is representing the coalition. These are the coalition of 27 cities, towns, and counties, including Portsmouth, board and committees of these volunteers, and then the expert staff and vendors that I previously described. So the coalition will purchase electricity, the ISO New England marketplace. Eversource will deliver that power over its lines to the residents of the city of Portsmouth. And the coalition is really the comprehensive service provider that is behind the scenes managing what's required to deliver that electricity. As far as timeline, this committee's been hard at work for some time. Research and plan drafting and development. We're in the public hearing phase, and then the plan will be, in step 3, brought to City Council for adoption and also sent to the state for review and approval. After that adoption and that approval, Portsmouth will be authorized to contract with service providers and then issue notifications and launch the program. And I believe that's the end of the material. So back to you, Councilor.
Great. I think, Henry, that was a great summary of the benefits and what we can expect. I would add that this coming Monday, the 13th, Henry will be back, and we're going to brief the city council in a work session so that we can have a vote on February 21st at the regular city council meeting whether or not to adopt the energy aggregation plan. So there will be a chance for public comment if anyone's watching at home at the session on Monday. And that'll be a more detailed presentation, go more into depth on governance, financial structure, cash flows, and the rollout. So we hope to inform the council and get them comfortable with all of the moving parts. Next, we sent out a survey to every resident and small business in the city, and we've had really gratifying response to that, hundreds and hundreds of people. And Allison Tanner, who is a member of the Energy Advisory Committee, will summarize what you as residents have told us you'd like to see in the Portsmouth Community Power Program.
Yes, so this is really just a high-level overview. And the first couple of questions and the last couple of questions were multiple choice, and so I'll cover those in the beginning. And then we have questions where there was a rating scale, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. But first slide.
Pull your mic a little forward.
Okay. So the first number listed on the right is the actual number of people, and then the second number on the right is the percentage of the whole that that group forms. And so Portsmouth homeowners were, by and large, the largest percentage of people replying on the survey at 85.2%. Then there were 11.7% were tenants, 0.7% were landlords, 0.5% were businesses, and then other. And other was people that are both a landlord and a homeowner, or some combination of the above. So again, when you look at who is your electricity supplier, Eversource, by and large, was the main energy provider with 78.5%. However, there was a good portion of people who are getting their power from a third-party supplier, and that was 21%. And then 2 people didn't know. So then we wanted to examine that a little bit more closely, and we asked, if your answer to question 1 was Eversource, why did you make that choice? And it was most people didn't know they had an option. That was 39.9%. 49 people said, I have no reason to look for a different supplier. 6.7% said, I tried to switch but couldn't find a supplier with better rates. Then we had other, and in that category, there were things like laziness, lack of trust, third-party rates higher at the time, or I didn't know how to change. And then the not applicable bit there is the same group of people that didn't have energy provided by Eversource. They went to a third-party supplier. So which option would be most important to you in the Portsmouth Community Power Program? So this is interesting because if you look at lowest energy cost option, that was 33.2% of the people. But going down to the fourth bar, the same or lower cost with more renewable energy content than I have today was 37% of the people. The others were 50% renewable with 6.4%, 100% renewable that may or may not cost more, 18.9, almost 20%. And then in the other category, reliability was the thing that people were saying was one of the most important things to them. And that was 4.1% of the people. And again, 2 people didn't know. So now in this part of the survey, what we did was we had a ranking. And so 0 was the least important and 10 was the most important, the highest priority for you. And so the ability to increase energy efficiency and reduce costs came out to 8.7, the average of all those different ratings. And right at the same level was control of energy costs. That again was also 8.7. And then lastly, we asked increased renewable energy sources, including locally generated. How important is that to you? It seems like it's important to a lot of people because that was 7.5 in the rating scale. And that's all I have.
So Allison, one question. We did allow for comments in the survey, and a number of people said, I tried a third-party supplier, but my rates ended up higher over time. Or it was really hard for me to figure out how to get a third-party supplier.
Right.
Henry, maybe you could comment for those residents of Portsmouth who shared that experience. How would it be different with the coalition?
Customers who are on the Eversource default need take no action to get the benefits of Portsmouth Community Power. So they'd be notified. There's already been some great outreach to raise awareness for this, and these public hearings are part of that. And then every customer would receive that notification and wouldn't have to take any action to start benefiting from the lower rate. So part of the thinking and the philosophy behind these programs is, you know, it can be difficult for individual customers to shop in the market. Sometimes there are, not always, but sometimes there are business practices predatory business practices, I guess you could say, where teaser rates and things like that. So Community Power is an opportunity to enhance consumer protection, where you have better oversight of these programs, so they're more accessible to customers.
And I would just add, Counselor, there will be there's the Department of Energy shopping website in the state that today has the utilities as well as the other competitive suppliers, and the coalition's rate will be presented on that shopping website too. So downstream, if somebody's with a competitive supplier and they say, oh, I wonder what the rate is at the coalition, they can go to the website. Same thing if they stick with Eversource and downstream are interested, they can go to the website. So the CPC&H rate will be included with the other options for all the residents in the state.
Great.
I just had a question for Henry, or not a question so much as if you could give us a little more explanation of what the portfolio management is. And maybe not everybody's familiar why that's important and how it's done and why it benefits the coalition.
Yeah, thank you. It is important. So Eversource and the other investor-owned utilities have to go to market at fixed times twice a year. Every 6 months, they go into the market and they buy power for 6 months. That's on a regulated clock and schedule. And that is, I guess you could say, not the most sophisticated way to buy power. These are competitive markets. Prices change on a minute-to-minute basis, let alone week-to-week, month-to-month, seasonally. So the utilities, because they're regulated, can't take advantage of changes in the market. Competitive suppliers, entities like the New Hampshire Electric Co-op, Community Power Coalition of New Hampshire, they can actively manage a portfolio. So they can choose when they go into the market. They can have some supply contracts for short-term or medium-term or longer-term. And by actively managing a portfolio, they demonstrate lower costs than the regulated utility approach. So there's this sort of 6-month utility going to the market, and that consistently has higher regulated costs relative to competitive entities like the coalition. I hope that helps answer the question.
Yes, thanks.
So, Henry, would our experience be similar to the New Hampshire Co-op? I mentioned that because it's nonprofit. It uses something of a portfolio model. And whenever Eversource's prices spiked up to 22 cents, the co-op, being a nonprofit with a portfolio, was running at 17 or 16 cents, considerably lower.
That's right. So I think the coalition is expecting somewhat comparable rates to the New Hampshire Electric Co-op, not necessarily being able to beat them even. But the co-op does consistently beat the Eversource rate, and the coalition expects to have comparable rates to the co-op.
Thank you. Any other questions before we go to the public hearing?
Are there questions to the audience rather than public comment? I'm not quite clear.
Normally, no, but we're a small group.
Thank you. My name is John Raganese. I'm a resident here in Portsmouth. I did answer the survey. It was a great survey, and I appreciate. I also appreciate all the effort that's gone into that.
Counselor, excuse me, sir, could we
Yeah.
get you to come up to a mic over here?
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering. If I can.
Yeah, just so we can get
So
you,
it's just questions, but.
so the people,
Yeah,
people can hear you at home.
And if you could give us your name and your address.
Thank you.
Thank you, Peter.
Yeah, so I have more questions than really a comment. So,
Name and address, please.
It's John Raganese, and I'm at 74 Cabot Street in Portsmouth.
Great.
I'll full disclosure, I've been in the electric generation wholesale business for over 40 years, working on total renewable generation in New England. So I have a little background here, but not in this area. So my first question was the last response that was made. When an individual goes and chooses a power supply alternative to Eversource, they go to a retail supplier, whereas the co-op doesn't go to retail suppliers. So my question is, in the coalition, when they purchase power or their portfolio, are they going to wholesale power suppliers or the same retail suppliers? Because that's where I'm having a hard time trying to figure out where the money savings is going to come from.
It's a good question, and the answer is almost a little bit complicated because of our launch schedule right now, but essentially both. So the coalition is set up to be able to transact directly in the market with wholesale buyers and sellers. So it will enlist a load serving entity and eventually potentially become a load serving entity, someone who's registered with the ISO New England market and transact directly with counterparties in that market.
Okay, so let me make that simpler. Yes, there'll be purchasers, potentially some of the purchase power is through wholesale rates or wholesale power purchase agreements, which is theoretically cheaper than what a retail supplier would be able to do. So that's really good, first of all. The second is in the portfolio. I thought I heard you mention that there would be a portfolio of different types of, say, agreements, power supply agreements. One could be 6 months, one could be a year, one could be 3 years. Example, we are providing the state of Vermont 20 years of firm power and peak power type of thing. So it's a mixture of that you're going to get your savings from. And I think that's really important for people to understand. This is not just buying power, but it's buying bulk power as opposed to retail power. That's generally
accurate.
correct.
And there's a fairly sophisticated hedging strategy.
Yeah, no, I got all that, but I'm
That will-
trying to make it kind of simple. So that's good. The second is about the action for the city, taking action. The city is establishing the Portsmouth community power, not necessarily, or is it both that and obligating to the purchasing power through the Community Power Coalition? It was a little unclear as to what, you said there might be options for the Portsmouth community power, but is it options only through the coalition? That's what I'm trying to understand.
We made the council made the decision to join the coalition, and it's our advice to the council to use the coalition as the bulk energy supplier.
But the action on the council is to establish the Portsmouth organization, not necessarily
Right.
to drive where it goes, to do its work.
So
It's unclear, that's what I was trying
Yeah,
to.
the Portsmouth Community Power is not itself an organization. It is a program, and then that program could be run by one of multiple service providers, one of which is Community Power Coalition, which is a corporation, a nonprofit corporation.
But the action before the Portsmouth City Council is to establish a commission of some sort that would enable one of those options to happen. Is that?
It would be to move forward with a program.
Mission plan.
Okay, okay, thank you.
And the plan, and the program is outlined in the EAP, the Energy Aggregation Plan, which is the subject of this hearing.
Councilor Chamber, can I just add, I think you just said that, but just to underscore it, we at first went to the council to say, would you approve of our suggestion of signing up with the coalition, or would you want the city of Portsmouth to hire a broker to work with? Now, if we wanted the broker, it would be a different thing altogether. And that was the first decision that was made.
Yeah.
And we said we don't want to go with the broker. We instead want to enroll with the coalition. So it's not the city of Portsmouth that is running the power thing. It would be through a broker if we did that, or through the coalition. So,
And we asked a lot of the same questions you were asking
Yeah.
about, we learned a lot about portfolio management.
Yeah, no, I get it, but I thought the slide that you had towards the end where there were going to be representatives on, for, and, at the local level.
no.
Well, so the,
Well, they're local representatives and the coalition.
right, so the coalition is comprised of a board of appointees from each member town.
That I understand.
Okay.
I was speaking more about the action that Portsmouth City Council is undertaking. Didn't I may have misread the slide, but I thought there was a slide pointing to a group of residents will be on a Portsmouth.
Yeah, this is the Energy Advisory Committee, and it will continue on.
Okay, so that's what that was still referring to.
Yeah, so the Energy Advisory Committee will still play a role.
Not a new.
Right,
Okay.
yes.
Thank you. It was a little unclear. And then I think lastly, I wanted to just ask that, you mentioned some questions about net metering and some challenges in it. Now, I net meter. I have solar on my roof. I net meter 100% through Eversource. If I were to change, and I do have a different power supplier, so it's not like I'm net metering back to my independent power supplier. I'm trying to figure out where this challenge is for you. Are you thinking that as an alternative to net metering to Eversource, there's something else, or I'm not quite clear on what you were talking about?
I'll give this one a shot. So there are regulatory rules that require utilities to share certain data sets with community power entities. Those include information on net metering, who's net metering, and what is their import-export to the grid. At present, the utilities haven't demonstrated their ability to fully comply with sharing that data. Community power needs that data to appropriately enroll the net metering customers into their energy supply programs and account for their power correctly. So the plan has always been net metering customers can participate in Portsmouth Community Power under essentially the same terms that they get with their net metering for their utility currently.
Or they're independent.
Right.
Or they're independent.
Or they're independent power suppliers.
Right. And what Portsmouth Community Power will not do is if they have not received the adequate data from the utilities, then net metering customers would not be automatically enrolled. They would have the choice of joining, but there won't be it's a do no harm sort of approach, right? If there needs to be certain, this is a technical issue, but so long as the data sharing and the rules are in compliance, then net metering customers would be enrolled and there would be no detriment to those customers. They would receive the same programs and products that they're currently getting. And otherwise, they would not be automatically enrolled into the program.
And the thought is that is a temporary until some of these logistics get worked out with the utility.
Okay.
So there's some technical issues that at launch, there may be some issues with net metering customers coming onto the program, but that's not meant to be a going forward issue, but at launch, it could be an issue.
For myself, as a resident that currently net meters, will I be able to join this program on day one?
You could choose to join, yes.
Okay.
You
And
would not
I lose my 100% kilowatt per kilowatt net metering rate?
No.
Okay. That's all. I
And are
wanted
you?
to know.
And there's a
That doesn't
nuance
sound
here.
like an issue to me, is what I'm trying to get at.
We got to that.
Okay, good. Thank you. I appreciate that you're letting me ask you a few questions. And my last one was just more simply on the map. A lot of colors for different communities. What did that represent?
We've gotten that question before. They don't mean anything, and I think it's a sign that we should change the colors perhaps on that slide.
Okay, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Any other questions? So now we'll start the public hearing. So if you can come forward and speak to the podium, please give us your name and your address and speak to, for, or against. And we've put in the agenda, limit your testimony to 5 minutes, and away we go.
Beecher Huda, 280 South Street. I'm not going to speak too for or against. I'm going to ask some questions and make some observations, and hopefully when you have your workshop and your public hearing to council, these will be addressed. So my first question is, on your first presentation, Community Power will. The City Council will support the Community Power Advisory Committee, will contract for the necessary services. On the next page of the presentation, it says Portsmouth Community Power will only launch if it is able to initially offer residential default rates that are lower than competitive. So my confusion is, from the Community Power side, they're looking for communities to opt in and contract in because this is the presentation that they're giving. And you're looking for Portsmouth to do that, but then on the second page when you say, if we can't get to that, we're not going to launch, that's a conflict in my mind. So if you could kind of clarify that. Next thing is, this is self-funded, and the rates will be paid by participating customers. The city will not use tax dollars for expenses. So my comment on that you need to think about is, if any city employee participates, it is tax dollars. And you have Peter Rice on there as a city staff employee as alternate. So I urge you to think about that one. Next, I'm going to go through, I actually went through the whole 70-some pages and wrote down some questions, so I will go through some of that. This might be repetitive, but I'm sure other people would be asking the same. So this is on page 7. Vendors are expected to fund and self-manage the upfront cost of launching community power programs under at-risk and performance-based contract structures with payments contingent upon successful launch. My question is, who will be monitoring this? And these costs later on will affect all of the people in the coalition. So it is probably critical on this to know somebody is monitoring this at this point in time before everybody gets in. Next, the program implementation cost for Portsmouth, along with other operational power procurement expenses, will be factored into customer rates and recovered from the revenues received from the participating customers after the launch of community power. So they're looking at the rates, and I understand you said we could have a surplus. So basically, the members still have to build up enough reserve to pay these startup costs, for a better word, and put those in their rates. So the question is, how will and at what point in time and who will determine when you flip from just having rates to provide power to adding amounts to pay for this reserve? My next question on the contract is, I didn't see anywhere where there is a term of this contract. Is this contract for 2 years, 5 years, 10 years? And how would, I guess, the residents know how long they're going to be able to choose this, and what would determine if they weren't able to have that opportunity anymore? Let's see. The next thing is on page 22. I'm assuming your default equals your base. This would be the lowest cost that you could possibly have. That was the assumption I made when I'm asking my questions here. So the thing that I found interesting in your rate and cost, Portsmouth will launch only if it's able to offer residential default rates that are initially lower or competitive with Eversource. The program will, keyword, strive to maintain competitive rates for all default customers. So once you sign up, I understand you could come in and out every 30 days, which I'm with another provider. That would be an awkward situation, but I'll just mention that. But when you go down to where the city council is going to participate, it said the city council will adopt the energy management risks. So words are important here, and I urge you to kind of be a little bit more specific when you're talking about rates, because they're important to people. The other thing that caught my eye that was very interesting, that was down in the middle of the page, it says over the long term, these funds may also be used to directly fund other programs' financial requirements or to augment the financing of development of new projects and programs in the later years of the program, subject to the city council's approval. So when I was here the first time, and we had the presentation from Henry, he explained that, say Portsmouth wanted to put in a wind farm or any type of different program. My understanding was that program would only be billed to the residents of Portsmouth or the community that would benefit. I guess I would like some clarification on that, so everybody understands if we decide to do something else in Portsmouth different, the cost is not spread through all of the other entities in the co-op. It is added on to only the customers in Portsmouth's bill. Okay, let's see, next. The re-enrollment process, it seems it's very good that people can opt in. I mean, if you're in the middle of a contract, like some of us will be when this gets transacted, because you have no idea at what point in time that'll happen, it's good that we could opt back in. Next, I would ask on page 23. After the launch, in accordance with applicable rules and procedures established by the Public Utilities Commission, new customers will be provided with a default service of Eversource and the Community Power, and will be transferred onto Community Power's default service unless they choose to be served by Eversource as a competitive supplier. So basically, your default is always Eversource, no matter what you do. And my understanding from the beginning is if you sell your house, the only thing that goes to the new owner is either Community Power or the default of Eversource. I guess I'd like that still confirmed. Let's see. On page 24, let's see. This is about customer data, and my friend over there asked the same thing. And this was a little confusing to me, and you might want to clarify this. Aggregate or I can't even say it, anonymized data that does not comprise confidentiality of individual customers may be released at the discretion of the Portsmouth Community Power and as required by law, which is fine. Then it goes on to say, participants will continue to be responsible for paying bills. Failure to do so may result in a customer being transferred from Portsmouth Community Power back to Eversource, the regulated distribution utility and provider of last resort. The default energy service payment and collections identify shutoffs under procedures subject to oversight by the Public Utilities Commission. Now, after the RSA went through and was approved, there was, I think, an amendment or an adjustment to this on non-collectible accounts. And I noticed none of the documentation had anything that addressed that. And the reason I'm asking that is what it meant, and this is big for many of the utilities, is if they can't collect their bills, they have non-collectible receivables in the whole state, and anybody who is a part of this coalition that enabled them to put all of the receivables back into that pool and be spread back out to the members of that. So my question is that still the case? And are you going to address it in the contract for Portsmouth and everybody else? Hit that. My other question is, I noted that Ascend Analytics and especially Calpine were putting a lot of money into this, I guess up front. And I would ask that when this goes to the city council, that it's very understandable about how much they would put in and when you would, as require from Community Power, to be asking for that money back. Because that will be assuming you have reserves to push it back into Community Power to start paying off these upfront costs. I hope that was clear. Because they're putting in the upfront cost. At some point in time, they're going to say, you need to start paying us back and increasing your rates. If that doesn't happen, will that be the default be to go back to the cities and the taxpayers in that case? So it would be nice if that was clear to the residents and probably the council. Let's see. So on page XII, I don't know where that is. This is about member cost sharing and agreements. So when in the process here, when Portsmouth actually contracts for this, my understanding was you're in and you're going to share, you've made an agreement to share those costs, whether you're going to launch or not. So the question is, what happens if after a year Portsmouth decides to leave? Is it described in the contract? Where is it defined about the actions or the dollars that are affected here? Is every community required still to pay the cost of startup when they were initially started to get involved with this and sign their contract? So basically, would Portsmouth be on the hook if in a year they said, we want to switch, this isn't working for whatever reason? Would there still be amounts owed to the coalition at that time? And I didn't see that anywhere, so I kind of wanted to know how that would work. The next one is under the attachment 4, utility default procurement cycles and rate settings. Portsmouth has a goal of maintaining comparative default rates as compared to Eversource. So that the interesting thing here was the timing of the program's rate setting decisions, and to a certain degree the procurement of electricity will need to consider when Eversource conducts the same activities, particularly for the program's default electrical product. So I wasn't really understanding why it's only Eversource here. The information also listed Liberty and Unitil and had a great amount of detail on Unitil. There was definitely more detail on Unitil, which was an Eversource competitor, than was given on Eversource. So if you could clarify that in the future.
How are we doing on time here?
Yeah. The only other questions I would have is on maintaining customer confidentiality on data. There was clauses in here where it said that the city manager would do that. I would hope before this went to the council and you finalized everything that our legal department would also look at this for the protection basically of the customer data that's going to be shared, because this is going to be shared with third parties and whomever, and I guess I would like the comfort to know that this data was, somebody's monitoring that. And basically now that the city of Portsmouth does have a CIO, that would be a lot easier. And that's my questions.
And just for your own information, I appreciate your detailed review of that. I think you'd be interested in downstream. I mean, the plan itself is while it's detailed, it's still fairly high level. It's supported by a number of detailed policies, one on power procurement, one on rates, one on financial reserve management, privacy, cost sharing between all the communities. And those are very, very detailed, dense documents that have been developed and approved by the board of the member communities. So those documents are a extensive supplement to that high-level plan. And a lot of the questions that you were asking, I think eventually when those get approved, if they do get approved by the city, you'd be interested in reviewing those as well. I think
Okay, those weren't the attachments that were listed in the publication then? There was like 10 attachments in there that I was looking at?
I'm
There's
not sure,
more?
if are the,
They're not. Those were approved just in really December.
Yeah.
They were finally
Oh,
approved.
okay, so we weren't able to
yeah,
review that,
and
okay.
the sequence of things, the city council approved the high level, even though it's many, many pages, energy aggregation plan, but then downstream within about a month and a half, if we get that far down, would approve all these very detailed governance policies that support the high level plan that get at a number of your questions in tremendous detail.
Okay.
Yeah.
And one other question, if this goes to the state for approval, what happens if they find something wrong? Does it get kicked back and we get to redo it, and how does that work?
Yeah, so the way it's written in the law, they have 60 days to deny the plan, to say it does not comply with the law for some reason. And if they make no ruling in the 60-day time period, it is automatically approved. So they have to sort of affirmatively reject it based on legal grounds. And then Portsmouth could address whatever the legal issue is and resubmit.
Oh, but they do notify on what their problem was, right?
Yeah, so they would have to document
Okay, good.
And about 12 plans have been reviewed and approved by the PUC, and the Portsmouth plan is probably 95% in alignment with those plans that have already been approved. Certainly there's some customization to Portsmouth around goals and some of the city policies, but the lion's share of the plan is what other communities are using, and as I mentioned, about a dozen of them have been approved by the PUC.
Because one of the notes in here that kind of made me a little nervous was if for some reason you're in the middle of community power and it doesn't work out, it would come back to the city. So in effect, you were establishing a city utility if that happens, and that would leave it up to the city to hire all the people that are involved here. So I guess that's part of the risk the city is taking, in getting involved with this.
Yeah, ultimately, if it didn't work out, the residents would just default back to Eversource.
And the city would not have to take up all of this.
In the cost-sharing agreement, there's details that what happens downstream once the community becomes a member, and at what time they did exit. If they exited the plan, there are certain obligations depending on there's certain exit ramps. But for the residents of the town, they would all default back and have no obligation, would default back to Eversource.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Petra. Next. Welcome, Andrea.
Hi, Andrea Amico, 187 Grant Ave. Thank you for hosting this public hearing tonight and for your work on this committee. I fully support these efforts. I think it's a great time to implement a plan like this, as many people are experiencing really high energy costs. Anything that can be done to reduce these costs is greatly appreciated. However, what really appeals to me in this plan is that it gives our community control in 3 ways. Where we source our power, what types of energy we use, and the ability to build up reserves and reinvest it back into projects that can benefit the community. We currently lack this control, and I like that with this plan we can have a more vested interest and say in our energy sources and costs. I have a few suggestions for the committee to consider. So I do understand there will be 4 different options for people to choose from, and I understand how these options are different, but what I don't really understand, or what's not clear to me, is how the cost is different. between the 4 plans, and I would like to think that most people will want to choose a plan that includes more green energy, but I do think for many people it will come down to cost. So can you please consider creating sample bills or an example showing the cost of the 4 different plans using the same amount of energy? I understand it's relevant to how much energy someone will use and the rates that you can secure. So maybe it's not an easy ask for me to ask you to do that, but I just think having an example for people of what the bills could be for the same amount of energy across the 4 plans will help people get a sense of the cost variations and hopefully allow them to make greener choices if it is affordable to them. And I worry that without an example of the range, I worry some people will assume the options with the renewable energy is a lot more expensive and just not even consider them. My next suggestion is when the program gets up and running and you notify people about opting out. I'm not sure if this notice will come from Eversource or if addresses are shared with the coalition and they'll notify people. Regardless, can you please consider notifying people by mail and email? I personally receive paperless billing from Eversource, and I'm not always tuned in to what I receive in my actual mailbox. And I also didn't receive the postcard with the survey, so I do worry. I may not receive the info about the options and my ability to opt out or opt up when it is sent out. And there may be other people like me who maybe aren't paying attention to their mailbox or the mailings, and it just might be beneficial to send that information both ways if you can. And then lastly, please consider once the program is up and running, offering incentives or rebates to customers who purchase energy efficient appliances. The city's water department currently does this for residents who buy low flow toilets and energy efficient washing machines. They will reimburse residents a rebate of $100 for a low flow toilet and $150 for an energy efficient washing machine. I think it's a great program because it helps incentivize residents to purchase more efficient appliances. It saves residents money on their bills, and it overall helps decrease the demand on the water supply and the sewer system, which is better for the environment. So I think a similar rebate program on the energy side of things could be effective and beneficial for everyone as well. So I just want to thank you all for your work on this committee. I really appreciate all you have done to bring the project this far, and I really hope it gets full support from the City Council. Thanks.
Thank you, Andrea. Henry, we'll publish the rates, correct, for each of the different service levels?
Yes, and because Portsmouth is not quite the first wave, the rates will be published for another 8, 9, 10 towns within a month. So the actual rates will be available, and they'll be available before Portsmouth is prepared to initiate the program.
And then we'd have them in the notification letter.
That's right. And I'll just note on the email point on the enrollment notices. So under the law and the way the coalition receives the mailing addresses from the utility companies, that's done through mailed notifications, and we're not in possession of email addresses to notify customers that way.
Could you just clarify when the solicitation
To the microphone, please.
No.
Well, we want it all in the public record, so.
John Raganese again, 74 Cabot Street. I just wanted to understand, it sounded to me, and it makes total sense, that you would have the rates available when you're soliciting people to opt in or opt out. What about the term?
So for an individual customer, there is no term. A customer can leave whenever.
Well, if you had a rate that was no longer met with a contract or a power supply, is that rate locked in for life? I don't get it. What do you mean?
The rate will change on the same calendar as the Eversource. So today it's February. And
So it's a 6-month rate?
It's a 6-month rate at
That's
this
all I'm
point in
asking.
time, yeah.
That's what I was trying to
So every time the default rate changes, we'll be changing. Things could change in the future for the coalition.
Sure. But when you're telling people this is the rate,
Right.
you'll also tell them it's for the next 6 months.
Yes, if we launched in February.
For some period of
So it
time.
would be 6 months. If we say launched in June, the rates change again in August. So the customers would be on a rate for June and July, and then it would change again in August, because that's when the utilities default rate changes.
And that's to maintain the discount relative to the utility.
Sure. The person that would opt in has an idea how long that rate will last.
Yes.
And
Typically, it'll be 6 months.
how would they know when the rate changes? how is the anticipated information going to be shared when the rate would change?
So that's all, it's on the website, the shopping comparison website, on the coalition's website. It could be on Portsmouth's website, and it'll be in the bills, but there won't be like a mailed notification every rate change.
But the Portsmouth Advisory Committee could notify its citizens of the rates.
Absolutely.
Good.
Yes,
That's what I wanted.
yes, and thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah.
Peter?
Could I just add to, I just want to add to Andrea's question, the issue of, you know, when people are first sign up, even if you are not informed of what the rate is going to be for some reason, let's say a mailing gets lost or something, since we're not launching unless we're lower than the default rate, the worst thing that could happen to you is that your next bill would have a supply rate that's lower than the last bill did. Okay, even if you weren't informed. So it's not that dangerous that you would be disadvantaged. The second thing is, if you follow the PUC's website comparing all 100% green energy with currently the default rate of Eversource, you can get as much as 5 cents cheaper rate right now for 100% green energy. So it's not to say that we necessarily have to assume it's always going to be more expensive. Currently, it isn't. It's 5 cents cheaper.
All right.
So,
Yeah. Do we have other speakers?
Hi, good evening. My name's Logan Roy. I live at 233 Hillside Drive. I have like 2 sentences worth of comment. I just wanted to say thanks again, and definitely I'm in support of Portsmouth Community Power and the EAP. And of particular interest to me and others I've spoken to about this is the ability of revenues from the sort of program to reinvest into local, specifically local renewable resources. So thanks again, and looking forward to seeing where this goes.
Thank you. Others, too for and against? How about on Zoom?
Nobody on Zoom. No questions.
All right. Going once? Going twice? Okay. I'll close the public hearing. And thank you, everybody who spoke. Thank you for really doing your homework, as we can always expect the residents of Portsmouth to do, and we have a list of questions that we'll work on when we get to the City Council work session. We should do a little bit of business before we adjourn. We want to get our EAP to the Utilities Commission. Did we hear anything tonight that would make us want to hold that back? I think our document's pretty good so far. And the benefit of getting that to the PUC is they can do our compliance review and take that 60 days and keep us on schedule.
I didn't see anything we couldn't get answers for residents, albeit maybe not worded explicitly in the EAP, but I don't think there's anything we can't answer or get answers based on what was presented tonight.
Yeah. I'm interested in clarification of former Councilor Huda's questions about receivables, but I don't think that would delay our EAP at all. And if not, I'd welcome a motion to submit that for review to the PUC. That does not bind the city at all. It just starts the legal compliance review.
I'll make a motion that we go ahead and submit the Portsmouth EAP to the PUC for their okay.
Right.
second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. And then one other thought I had that I wanted to share with you. We now have closed out the survey, And it would seem to make sense to me to include that in the EAP. I think we have Appendix 7 is, we mention that we have done a survey, and all we would have to say is, and the results are, and we could put the slides in. So I wanted to get a sense from you.
Seems like a good idea.
Is that
Yeah.
okay, Henry, to have something
Certainly.
like that in the plan?
And we were discussing having that earlier, but also I think there needs to be just a little bit of explanation in some of the categories. So just a few words like, who is the other? When there are people that are not Portsmouth residents, what are they? And they chose to select that because they are both landlords and residents or whatever, just so that there's a little blurb that says.
Yeah, I'm trying to think how we could do that.
Because we, if I might,
Yes,
because we have survey results in the PowerPoint, I can edit the PowerPoint to add the definition of what
Explanation.
other is.
Okay.
And also, I mean, at the committee's pleasure, are we including essentially the slides from the presentation?
Yes.
Not all the emails, not all the comments, just the highlights.
I think just the slides, you know, with a link, if we have the survey posted.
Again, we're doing the high level because the whole survey has everyone's email.
Right. That's, yeah, we don't
Yeah.
want to disclose that for sure. Thank you for the heads up on that.
So we'll just put the results of this survey are shown in the attached PowerPoint, something
Right.
like that,
And we'll add those explanations, those
with
definitions.
the explanations.
And if you'd like me to send you explanations for each one of the slides that I
That'd be
have.
great. For Stephanie and I.
Yeah, if you send them to me, I'll edit the
Okay.
PowerPoint, and then I'll convert it to a PDF so that you can include it. So we were asking if the EAP is submitted as a PDF, or if it has to be a Word document.
Typically, I believe I've seen PDF submissions.
Okay, because
Hey,
then
don't
it's
let the
easy
PUC
to
change it.
attach.
Yeah, we don't want to do Word.
Yeah, they don't
It'd be
need to make
so many
any.
megabytes bigger.
And just as an explanation for those of us watching, the PUC has a 60-day review period. All they do is verify that our plan is in compliance with RSA 53E.
Right.
So the actual decision to move forward with the program is the city council voting on February 23rd to approve the EAP, and then we're able to withdraw at any time up until we agree with the Community Power Coalition to start sourcing power. And that would not happen until mid-April, something like that. This is a step we have to kick off now, so the PUC has time to go through its verification that we're within the ordinance, within the RSA. Right? Have I got that?
Yes,
about
right up to the point in time, like the day after the PUC approves it, theoretically, the risk committee meets to authorize the coalition to move forward to start procuring power for Portsmouth. And at that meeting, we'd have a representative, designated representative from the city to say yes, or if there's any reason not to move forward, they could say no at that meeting. And if you look at our calendar, that's out around April 13th.
Yeah.
So even though we're submitting the plan perhaps tomorrow, hopefully tomorrow, the calendar, if it plays out 60 days, we wouldn't technically be on the hook to moving forward till mid-April, as you said, Counselor.
Right. And Peter and Stephanie, we comfortable with those next steps, adding the,
Yeah, we'll get it submitted tomorrow
great, okay. With the slides.
with the slides and the
Yeah.
changes.
I do think that, the survey shows that people want lower rates and that they want more green energy, and I think that's strong evidence
pretty
to
clear,
support the program. Okay. Any other business for us? Thanks, everyone. We've got some good public input, and we'll digest those questions, go to work on them. Take a motion to adjourn, if there's one.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.